Picture this. You're standing at the center of a vast crossroads, where 7 different paths stretch out before you like the spokes of a wheel. Each road is bathed in its own distinct light. One glows with the warm amber of possibility, another shimmers with the cool blue of logic, a third pulses with the deep red of passion. The green path promises growth, the purple one whispers of creativity, the silver one gleams with practicality, and the golden one radiates with purpose. You stand there turning slowly, and each direction you face feels like the direction. Each path makes perfect sense. Each one calls to a different part of who you are, who you've been, who you could become. The problem isn't that you don't know where to go. It's that every direction seems right and wrong at the same time. This is the moment when most people tell themselves they're confused, lost, indecisive, broken somehow. They stand in that intersection, beating themselves up, wondering why they can't just pick a lane like everyone else seems to do so effortlessly. But what if I told you that you're not confused at all? What if that overwhelming feeling, that sense of being pulled in multiple directions simultaneously, isn't a sign of weakness or uncertainty, but actually evidence of something quite extraordinary happening in your mind? You're not experiencing confusion. You're experiencing an overload of perceptions. Your consciousness has expanded to the point where you can see multiple truths simultaneously. Multiple valid paths, multiple correct answers to the same question. And while this is actually a remarkable cognitive achievement, it can feel like standing in a thunderstorm of possibilities with no umbrella. This isn't a problem to be fixed. It's a phenomenon to be understood. And once you understand it, once you realize that you're not lost in confusion, but navigating through an abundance of truths, everything changes.
Your brain wasn't designed to handle just one perspective at a time. It's actually a sophisticated pattern recognition machine that's constantly processing multiple streams of information, weighing different possibilities, and running parallel analyses of every situation you encounter. Think about what happens when you witness an argument between 2 people. Let's say a couple fighting in a coffee shop. As you watch, something remarkable occurs in your mind. You don't just see one right side and one wrong side. Instead, your brain starts building 2 completely coherent narratives simultaneously. You see her frustration. She's been carrying the mental load of their relationship for months, remembering birthdays, planning dates, managing their social calendar, while he seems oblivious to her efforts. Her anger makes perfect sense. She's exhausted from being the only one who cares about the details that keep their life together running smoothly. But then, you also see his perspective. He's been working extra hours to save for the vacation she mentioned wanting, picking up overtime shifts and saying no to social events so they can afford something special. He thought he was showing love through sacrifice, but now he's being attacked for the very thing he thought would make her happy. His confusion and defensiveness make perfect sense too. Both truths exist simultaneously. Both are valid. Both are real. This is where the philosophical concept of truth as a prism becomes essential to understand. When white light hits a prism, it doesn't break into right colors and wrong colors. It reveals the full spectrum that was always there. Each angle of the prism shows you a different color, but none of them are false. The red isn't more correct than the blue. They're all components of the complete truth. Your consciousness works the same way. When you encounter a complex situation, your awareness acts like that prism, revealing multiple facets of reality that most people simply can't see. Where others might see a simple black and white scenario, you're experiencing the full spectrum, and it's overwhelming. The emotional consequence of this phenomenon is what psychologists sometimes call decision paralysis, but it feels much more profound than that clinical term suggests. It's the sensation of being suspended between worlds, unable to move because every movement seems to invalidate another equally valid truth. You feel stuck not because you lack information, but because you have too much of it. It's the weight of carrying multiple perspectives in your chest at once, feeling the pull of contradictory desires, understanding opposing viewpoints so clearly that you can't dismiss either one, seeing the merit in paths that lead to completely different destinations. This isn't confusion. This is the burden and the gift of expanded awareness.
Carl Jung once wrote something that stops most people in their tracks. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also warned us about something far more unsettling. That consciousness, when it expands beyond what we can comfortably bear, becomes a burden that can crush the unprepared soul. Jung understood what many of us are experiencing right now. There's a threshold where awareness becomes almost unbearable. He called it consciousness expanded beyond the measure of man. And if you've ever felt like you're drowning in your own understanding of the world, you know exactly what he meant. When your consciousness expands, you don't just see more, you feel more. Every injustice becomes personal. Every contradiction in society weighs on your chest. Every hypocritical action by someone you care about feels like a small betrayal. You start noticing the micro-expressions that reveal what people are really thinking, the subtle power dynamics in every conversation, the unspoken assumptions that govern every interaction. Your sensitivity to nuances becomes so acute that walking through a grocery store can feel overwhelming. You notice the exhaustion in the cashier's eyes, the anxiety radiating from the mother struggling with her toddler, the loneliness of the elderly man counting out exact change. You feel the environmental impact of every plastic package, the ethical implications of every product choice, the economic structures that make healthy food inaccessible to so many. This isn't neurosis. It's what happens when your awareness outpaces your emotional capacity to process it all. There's a crucial difference between not knowing and knowing too much at once. Not knowing is comfortable. It's the luxury of ignorance, the peace of assuming that what you can see is all there is. But knowing too much at once? That's sensory and cognitive overload on a spiritual level. Your brain, designed to filter out irrelevant information for survival, suddenly can't decide what's irrelevant anymore. Everything seems connected. Every decision ripples outwards in ways you can trace but can't control. You see the butterfly effect in real time, and it's paralyzing. You understand why your friend stays in that toxic relationship because you can see their childhood wounds, their attachment patterns, their fear of abandonment all playing out simultaneously. But you also understand why they should leave, why staying is slowly killing their spirit, why their partner's behavior is unacceptable. Both truths sit in your chest like stones, equally real, equally urgent. This is what Jung meant about consciousness becoming unbearable. It's not that you're weak or confused, it's that you're carrying the full weight of reality's complexity without the comfortable filters that most people use to protect themselves from seeing too much. The result is you feel everything and nothing at once. Deeply connected to the pain of the world, yet isolated by the very depth of your understanding. Capable of seeing solutions that others can't grasp, yet paralyzed by your awareness of how difficult implementation would be. This is the price of awakening. This is what it costs to see the world as it really is.
If you're experiencing this overwhelming flood of awareness, there's something you need to understand. You're not broken. You're not too much. You're what researchers call a highly sensitive person, and your nervous system is literally wired differently. Dr. Elaine Aron's groundbreaking research revealed that about 20% of the population has a more sensitive nervous system, one that processes sensory information more deeply and thoroughly. But here's what most people don't realize. This isn't just about being bothered by loud noises or bright lights. It's about processing everything more intensely. Your brain doesn't just notice the obvious. It picks up on subtleties that others miss entirely. You catch the slight hesitation in someone's voice that reveals their uncertainty. You sense the shift in energy when someone walks into a room carrying unprocessed grief. You feel the collective anxiety of a crowd before anyone else even realizes something is wrong. This deep processing isn't a bug, it's a feature. Throughout human history, sensitive people have served as the canaries in the coal mine, the early warning system for communities. We're the ones who noticed when something was off, who could sense danger before it became obvious, who could feel the emotional undercurrents that others ignored. But in today's world, this gift has become almost unbearable. We live in an era of unprecedented information overload. Our ancestors might have encountered a few dozen people in their entire lifetime. You encounter hundreds of faces, voices, and emotional signatures every single day through social media alone. Your sensitive system, designed to pick up on important nuances in a small community, is now trying to process the emotional data of thousands of strangers. Add to that the complexity of modern life, the constant moral choices about consumption, the awareness of global suffering through 24/7 news cycles, the bombardment of conflicting expert opinions on everything from health to politics, and you have a recipe for what feels like madness, but is actually just overwhelm. Your sensitivity means you can't just turn off your awareness. When someone says, just don't think about it, they might as well be asking you to stop breathing. Your nervous system doesn't have an off switch for depth of processing. You can't choose to see only the surface of things. This is why simple decisions become impossible. Choosing a restaurant means weighing not just your preferences, but the environmental impact, the treatment of workers, the cultural implications, the health consequences, and how your choice might affect the people you're with. What others see as a simple meal, you experience as a complex moral and social equation. It's why you can feel simultaneously grateful for your depth of perception and exhausted by it. You see beauty that others miss, the way light filters through leaves, the profound courage in small acts of kindness, the intricate web of connection between all living things. But you also see pain that others overlook, the subtle signs of depression in loved ones, the systemic inequalities embedded in everyday interactions, the environmental destruction hiding behind convenient packaging. You're not confused. You're not overthinking. You're not being dramatic. You're a sensitive person trying to navigate an insensitive world with a nervous system that was designed for depth in an era that rewards surface-level engagement. The confusion you feel isn't a character flaw. It's the natural result of a deep processing system encountering more complexity than any human was ever meant to handle alone. Understanding this doesn't make the overwhelm disappear, but it does something equally important. It helps you realize that your struggle is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you're functioning exactly as you were designed to, with extraordinary depth in extraordinarily complex times.
Carl Jung once wrote something that might explain exactly what you're experiencing. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also warned us about something darker, that consciousness can expand beyond what the human psyche can bear. Jung understood that awakening isn't always enlightening. Sometimes it's crushing. When your awareness expands, you don't just gain pleasant insights about the interconnectedness of all things. You also become acutely aware of suffering, both your own and that of others. You start seeing the threads that connect everything, and some of those threads are soaked in pain. This is what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing truths simultaneously. But here's what he discovered in his own psychological breakdown. When you can see too many truths at once, your mind can fracture under the weight of contradictions. Think about it this way. Imagine your consciousness as a radio receiver. Most people's receivers are tuned to a narrow frequency band. They pick up the main station clearly, the obvious truths, the socially accepted that help them navigate daily life. But your receiver is different. It's incredibly sensitive, picking up multiple stations at once.
You're hearing the main broadcast, but you're also catching fragments of conversations from distant stations, static-filled transmissions of half-formed thoughts, emergency broadcasts that others can't detect. This isn't not knowing, this is knowing too much at once. When someone says they don't know what to think about a political situation, they might genuinely be uninformed. When you say you don't know what to think, you're drowning in information. You can see the valid points on multiple sides, the historical context, the personal motivations, the systemic forces at play, the potential consequences of different actions, and the human cost of every possible outcome. Your mind becomes a battlefield where equally compelling truths wage war against each other. You might find yourself paralyzed not by ignorance, but by too much understanding. You see how your friend's annoying behavior stems from childhood trauma, but you also see how it's affecting their current relationships. You understand why your parent made the choices they did, but you also feel the impact those choices had on your own development. You can empathize with everyone's perspective in a conflict, while simultaneously feeling the pain of all parties involved. This is what Jung experienced during his own confrontation with the unconscious, a period he later called his most important time. He wrote, "The years when I was pursuing my inner images were the most important in my life. In them, everything essential was decided." But he also described it as nearly unbearable, a time when he felt like he was losing his mind. The difference is that Jung was encountering his own unconscious material. You're encountering the unconscious material of an entire culture, an entire species, in real time through social media, news cycles, and unprecedented global connectivity. Your sensitivity means you're not just aware of your own inner contradictions, you're picking up on the collective shadow, the unprocessed trauma of communities, the suppressed truths that societies prefer to ignore. You feel the cognitive dissonance of a culture that preaches love while practicing violence, that values individuality while demanding conformity, that promises freedom while creating systems of control. And unlike Jung, who could retreat into his studies and his private practice, you're expected to function normally in a world that's constantly broadcasting its chaos directly into your nervous system. This is why the confusion feels so intense. It's not the gentle bewilderment of someone who doesn't understand something simple. It's the overwhelming vertigo of someone who understands too much, too deeply, too quickly. Your consciousness has expanded beyond your capacity to integrate all the information you're receiving. The tragedy is that this expansion of awareness, this ability to hold multiple truths simultaneously, is actually a form of evolved consciousness. In a saner world, you would be valued as a wisdom keeper, someone whose deep perception could help guide collective decision-making. Instead, you're labeled as overthinking or too sensitive and encouraged to numb your awareness rather than develop the skills to manage it. But the weight you feel isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're carrying something precious and profound, a type of consciousness that our world desperately needs, even if it doesn't know how to support it.
Becoming the conductor of your own symphony. Imagine standing in front of a world-class orchestra, where every musician is playing a different piece of music at the same time. The violins are performing Vivaldi, the brass section is blasting Wagner, the percussion is pounding out a tribal rhythm, and the woodwinds are weaving through a haunting jazz melody. Each individual performance is beautiful, technically perfect, and emotionally moving. But together, it's complete chaos. This is your mind right now. Every truth you're perceiving, every nuance you're processing, every layer of reality you're seeing, they're all valid, they're all beautiful, they're all important. But without a conductor to organize them into something coherent, they're creating a cacophony that's driving you to the edge of madness. The solution isn't to fire half the orchestra. The solution is to learn how to conduct. The art of selective focus. The first technique is practicing selective focus, not because the other truths don't matter, but because your consciousness needs a central theme to organize around. Think of it like tuning into a specific radio frequency. All the other stations are still broadcasting, but you're choosing to receive one signal clearly, rather than getting static from trying to hear them all simultaneously. This doesn't mean becoming ignorant or closing your eyes to complexity. It means consciously choosing which layer of truth deserves your primary attention right now, in this moment, for this decision. When you're choosing what to have for dinner, you don't need to simultaneously process the ethical implications of industrial agriculture, the environmental impact of your food choices, the cultural significance of your meal, the economic systems that brought this food to your table, and the psychological patterns that influence your cravings. All of these are real and valid considerations, but focusing on them all at once turns a simple decision into an existential crisis. Instead, you can acknowledge that these other layers exist, give them a mental nod of recognition, and then consciously choose to focus on just one or two. Right now, I'm choosing based on what sounds good and what I have available. I can address the larger ethical questions during my weekly meal planning session. This is selective focus in action. You're not becoming less conscious, you're becoming more intentional about how you direct your consciousness. Creating your hierarchy of values. The second technique is establishing a clear hierarchy of your values, not because some values are inherently more important than others, but because having a ranking system gives you a framework for making decisions when multiple valid truths are pulling you in different directions. Your values are like the different sections of your orchestra. Sometimes the strings need to take the lead melody while the brass provides support. Sometimes the percussion drives the rhythm while everything else follows. The music changes, but the conductor always knows which section should be prominent at any given moment. Maybe authenticity is your first violin. It gets priority in most situations. Maybe compassion is your lead trumpet. It comes in strong when relationships are involved. Maybe growth is your percussion section. It provides the driving beat for your life decisions. Maybe security is your woodwinds, adding depth and harmony, but rarely taking the solo. When you're facing a decision and multiple truths are competing for your attention, you can ask yourself, which of my core values needs to take the lead in this situation? This doesn't mean ignoring the others, but it gives you a clear hierarchy to organize around. When you're deciding whether to stay in a comfortable job or pursue a risky creative venture, and you can see valid arguments for both choices, your value hierarchy becomes your conductor's baton. If growth ranks higher than security in your personal symphony, you have your answer. If security needs to lead right now because of your life circumstances, that's equally valid. Choosing your starting point. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for someone who can see multiple truths simultaneously. Your expanded consciousness wants to find the perfect solution that honors every nuance, addresses every concern, and satisfies every valid perspective. But perfection is the enemy of action, and action is required for growth. Think of your starting point as the opening note of a symphony. It doesn't contain all the music that will follow, but it provides the reference tone that everything else can harmonize with. You can't play the entire symphony simultaneously. You have to start somewhere and let the music unfold. This means accepting that your first step won't address every truth you're seeing. It won't solve every problem you're aware of. It won't satisfy every part of yourself that has valid concerns. And that's not only okay, it's necessary. When you choose a starting point, you're not committing to it forever. You're not claiming it's the ultimate truth or the final solution. You're simply saying, given everything I can see right now, this feels like the most aligned place to begin. I'll course correct as I go. the symphony of imperfect action. Here's what happens when you start conducting your inner orchestra instead of letting it play in chaos. The music doesn't become perfect, but it becomes purposeful. Some sections still play too loud sometimes. Some instruments occasionally miss their cues. The melody might wander in unexpected directions. But there's harmony. There's forward movement. There's beauty emerging from the complexity instead of just noise. You'll still see all the truths you were seeing before. Your consciousness won't shrink back to a simpler state. But instead of being paralyzed by the symphony of possibilities, you'll be creating music with them. The goal was never to reduce the richness of what you can perceive. The goal was to transform that richness from overwhelming chaos into purposeful creation. You are not confused. You are not broken. You are not thinking too much or feeling too deeply. You are a conductor who has been trying to play every instrument at once, instead of leading the orchestra toward harmony. Pick up your baton, choose your opening note, and let the symphony begin.
So here we are, at the end of our journey together, and I want you to understand something profound. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are not overthinking or being too sensitive or any of the other dismissive labels the world might try to place on your experience. You are standing at the intersection of multiple realities, and instead of choosing ignorance for the sake of simplicity, you've chosen to see. You've chosen to feel. You've chosen to remain awake in a world that often rewards sleepwalking. That overwhelming sensation you've been carrying, that feeling of being pulled in 17 different directions at once, that's not confusion, that's consciousness. That's your mind refusing to accept simple answers to complex questions. That's your heart refusing to shut down in the face of life's beautiful, terrible complexity. You're swimming in an ocean of truths. Think of yourself as someone who has learned to see underwater. While others are content to splash around on the surface, you've discovered that beneath those waves lies an entire universe of truth. Schools of possibilities swim past you in brilliant colors. Coral reefs of wisdom stretch as far as you can see. The pressure is intense down here, yes, but the beauty is extraordinary. The person floating on the surface might look down at you and think you're drowning. They might throw you life preservers and shout advice about staying in the shallow end. But you're not drowning, you're exploring depths that most people never even know exist. Your challenge isn't learning to see less, it's learning to navigate the depths with intention, rather than being tossed around by every current of truth that flows past you. The courage to choose direction. Here's what I want you to do right now, not tomorrow, not when you figure everything out perfectly, but right now. Choose one direction. Not because it's the only valid direction, not because it negates all the other truths you can see, but because forward movement requires choosing a path. Look at all those beautiful, overwhelming truths swirling around you. Acknowledge them. Thank them for their wisdom. And then, with full awareness that you're not choosing the only truth, just the one you're going to follow right now, pick one. Let the others wait. This isn't betrayal. This isn't ignorance. This is the mature recognition that you can honor multiple truths without having to act on all of them simultaneously. You can see the complexity and still choose simplicity of action. Your permission to be imperfectly wise. I'm giving you permission to be imperfectly wise, to see all the nuances and still make bold choices, to acknowledge uncertainty and still move forward with conviction, to hold space for multiple truths while committing fully to one path. You don't have to have it all figured out to take the next step.
You don't have to resolve every contradiction before you're allowed to act. You don't have to wait until you can see a clear path all the way to the horizon. The truth is, the clearest path reveals itself only as you walk it. The next step becomes visible only when you take this step. The symphony finds its harmony only when you start conducting. Your sensitivity is not your weakness, it's your superpower. Your ability to see multiple perspectives isn't confusion, it's wisdom. Your capacity to hold space for contradiction isn't instability, it's emotional sophistication. The world needs your kind of seeing. The world doesn't need another person who sees only what they want to see. It doesn't need another voice that shouts simple answers to complex questions. It doesn't need another leader who pretends certainty in the face of mystery. The world needs people like you. People who can see the full spectrum of truth and still find the courage to choose. People who can hold complexity and still take action. People who can navigate uncertainty without losing their compassion for those who are also struggling to find their way. Your ability to see multiple truths simultaneously isn't a burden you need to fix, it's a gift you need to learn to wield. Clarity is not about seeing less, and here's the final truth I want to leave you with, the one that changes everything. Clarity is not about seeing less, it's about knowing where to look first. You don't need to dim your perception. You don't need to simplify your understanding. You don't need to choose ignorance over awareness. You just need to choose your focus. You just need to decide which truth deserves your attention right now. You just need to trust that all the other truths will still be there when you're ready for them. The ocean of truth isn't going anywhere, but you, beautiful, conscious, overwhelmed you get to choose which current to follow home. So choose. Not perfectly, not permanently, not without acknowledging all the other valid choices you could make, but choose. Your symphony is waiting for its conductor. Your truth is waiting for its voice. Your life is waiting for you to stop drowning in possibilities and start swimming with purpose. The water is deep, yes, but you were born to swim in these depths. Now go create something beautiful with all that truth you've been carrying.
The problem isn't that you don't know where to go. It's that every direction seems right and wrong at the same time. Picture yourself standing at the center of an impossible intersection. Roads stretch out before you in every conceivable direction. Not just the typical four-way crossroads of childhood games, but dozens of paths radiating outward like spokes on a cosmic wheel. Each one glows with its own distinct light. One bathes everything in the warm amber of possibility, another casts the cool blue shadows of logic, while a third pulses with the deep red urgency of passion. You've been standing here longer than you care to admit, paralyzed not by ignorance, but by an overwhelming abundance of insight. Your mind processes each pathway with startling clarity. Down the amber road, you can see yourself building the creative life you've always dreamed of, the risks and rewards laid out in perfect detail. The blue path reveals a future of stability and sensible choices, each step mapped with mathematical precision. The red route throbs with the promise of following your heart. Consequences be damned. But there's more, so much more. Purple paths whisper of spiritual fulfillment. Green ones promise environmental consciousness. Silver roads gleam with technological advancement. Golden highways stretch towards service and sacrifice. Each route is illuminated by truths that feel absolute in their own light, yet somehow contradictory when seen together. This is what everyone calls confusion, but they're wrong, dead wrong. You're not confused, you're not overthinking, you're not being indecisive or weak or lost. you're experiencing something far more profound and far more exhausting. You're seeing too many truths at once. Your consciousness has developed the capacity to perceive multiple valid realities simultaneously. And instead of the clarity that everyone promised would come with wisdom, you've discovered that wisdom often looks like standing at the center of a kaleidoscope, watching as every slight turn reveals another equally beautiful, equally valid pattern. The weight you feel isn't the burden of not knowing, it's the overwhelming responsibility of knowing too much, of seeing not just what could be, but what should be, what might be, what must be, and what absolutely cannot be, all swirling together in a symphony of possibility that threatens to drown you in its complexity. And the cruelest irony? The people around you, the ones who seem so certain, so decisive, so clear about their direction, they look at your stillness and mistake it for emptiness. They see your careful consideration and assume you're lost. They witness your deep seeing and conclude you're blind. But you're not any of those things. You're simply someone who has developed the rare and beautiful curse of being able to hold multiple truths in your heart simultaneously without the luxury of dismissing any of them as false.
So remember, you're not confused. You're just capable of seeing the beautiful complexity of truth itself. And that's not a weakness, it's a superpower. If just resonated with you, I'd love it if you could hit that like button. It really helps more people discover this message. And if you know someone who's been struggling with feeling overwhelmed by life's contradictions, please share this video with them. They might need to hear this today. I'm curious. Drop the word clarity in the comments below if you're ready to embrace your ability to hold multiple truths. Or tell me, what's one situation in your life right now where you're seeing multiple valid perspectives? Your insights in the comments always inspire me and help build our community. And speaking of continuing this journey, there are 2 additional videos appearing on your screen right now. Click on one of them to dive deeper into mastering this mindset. Whether you choose the first or second option, you'll find more tools to navigate life's beautiful complexity. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.